All right, we're back here on the ASN Ranking Show. Last week, didn't do it because I was at volleyball with Duran Miller, Alex Gallion, Aaron Powers, Chase Carpenter, Brad Caldwell. We were all really busy with that last week. So going to get back into it this week. And going to start off with Class 2A here. Got a lot to talk about really with this class. And you look at Carlisle, they have stayed on top. Conway Christian trails right there with them. I'm personally hearing a lot of people who think that Conway Christian and Carlisle are sort of one and two right there next to each other, and that it's kind of Conway Christian and Carlisle and then everybody else. Now, teams like Murfreesboro and Bigelow, who haven't lost a game to a 2A team yet, um, are trying to change that conversation. Desark is a team that people are still really high on, despite a couple losses to Class 2A teams, losses to Carlisle, and then a loss last week to East Poinsett County. And of course, Mark Tree, people are probably going to still make their case too. They're such an explosive team. You can't. It's hard to handle their offense a lot of times. Mount Ida has a secret weapon that I'll talk about later in the video once we get to them. East Poinsett County is in the driver's seat especially if they win. I mean, if they win against Mark Tree, they've locked it up. But they're in the driver's seat right now to have the one seed out of the 2A2 conference, which many believe is the most competitive conference in the class. And so there's really a lot to talk about this week. But go ahead, if you haven't already, subscribe to us right here on the Arkansas Sports Network YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell. Once you hit subscribe, you want to be notified whenever we go live or whenever we make a new video. We have all kinds of content coming out. Follow us on X, Instagram, and Facebook as well. Of course, our largest following is on Facebook, but we're trying to build our platforms on X and Instagram as well. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Carlisle remains the king of the castle at the number one spot. They look like they're really good. Let me just this here. Ty Tanksley might be the best freshman quarterback I've ever seen at this level. Of course, I haven't been around very long, to be honest. But he's special, a special talent, obviously a special baseball player, but on the football field, he's making his presence known as well. Gavin Davis, really electric receiver on the outside. Um, I know that Jaden Elliott's a solid back. Maybe some small questions with that Carlisle offensive line, with them really not being as big as they have been. And like we talked about, really in the preseason, the X factor in the class has really been Carlisle's offensive line the past few years. And I haven't, you know, I'm not super familiar with their line of scrimmage, but in my opinion, you can't be a winning football team without a successful line of scrimmage and a powerful line of scrimmage. So obviously, Carlisle's got something going on well on the line of scrimmage. Conway Christian, this is a team I'm super familiar with. I'll be at their game against Bigelow for the conference championship on Friday night. Of course, just want to throw it out there as well. I didn't mention this with Carlisle. We will be broadcasting the Battle of Highway 70 between Carlisle and Hazen on Friday night. Really excited, or excuse me, on Thursday night. Messed it up again. Really excited to see what happens in that game. Of course, Brad Caldwell, Duran Miller, those guys will be on the call and should be a very, very interesting game between those two teams. We'll go on down to Murfreesboro. This is a team that many people could make an argument for as still being one of the teams that's a serious contender to make it to Little Rock. The Rattlers have a lot of really talented players. I believe Brody Maroon is one of the names that people are keeping their eye on. I mean, especially when they beat Junction City, that kind of locked up the conference for them. And excuse me, I think I said Brady Maroon. I think it's Brody Maroon. Either way, um, Murfreesboro is a team that's under Coach Cheshire has become super physical. They run an I formation option kind of offense. It's hard to defend for a lot of teams. It was hard to defend for Junction City, and their defense is still obviously pretty talented. They have really surged. I mean, if you bought Murfreesboro stock when they were unranked in our rankings, you'd be a really rich person right now, because they have skyrocketed in our rankings to number 3 after being unranked just a couple weeks ago. Number 4, Desart. led by Hudson Goodman at quarterback, Davion Bell in the backfield as well. Of course, they have one of the best fronts on both sides of the ball in the class. They're a hard team to count out at the moment because they look like maybe the most physical team in the class. However, losses to East Point, County, and Carlisle don't really help their case to be a top three team. They do move in at number four, and I do think that if they match up well with some teams that can't defend the run, like a Mark Tree, um, or maybe Junction City, then they'll have a good shot. But the playoff seeding is still up in the air right now. You have Conway Christian and Bigelow who are competing for that top spot out of the 2A1. And then you have still some competition for the 2A2 top spot. 2A3 and 2A4 are kind of locked down at this point. Murfreesboro and Carlisle probably have the one seeds out of those conferences. But it's still going to be an interesting couple games this week that are going to decide some of the conference races and who makes the playoffs and who are the top seeds. Bigelow moves in at number 5. Bigelow takes on Conway Christian. They have to go on the road this weekend and play a tough Conway Christian team, probably the best team that Conway Christian has ever had, at least record-wise. Conway Christian has never been 9-0 before. Bigelow, defending state champions, haven't lost a game to a 2A opponent yet. Lost to Perryville and Mayflower in non-conference, but they beat 2A England. And then they've continued their conference winning streak. To me, a surprise win over Mount Ida a couple weeks ago, 35-21 at Mount Ida. They played a great game in that one. Mount Ida had some things that didn't go their way. I'm still super high on Mount Ida, and I'll get to them in a second. But Bigelow with Jaden Dunlap, Martell Macon, Braden Winningham. They've got some guys that can really play ball over in Bigelow. Really excited to watch that game between Bigelow and Conway Christian this week for sure. It's been the conference championship game the past 3 years, and Bigelow has won it twice. Conway Christian is out for revenge this year. We'll see how that game goes. It's at Conway Christian, like I said, and the Eagles have not lost a game at home since losing to Bigelow back in 2022 for the conference championship game. Number 6, Junction City. Junction City is a bit of an X Factor team. Everybody had them as the heavy favorite to win the title this season. Mark Tree and Conway Christian, you heard as well. Carlisle has not really come out of nowhere because we had them ranked at number 4 coming into the season, and I know some other places had them ranked higher than that. So Carlisle hasn't really come out of nowhere, but Junction City has disappointed a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if they made a deep playoff run, if they got some good matchups that they can play well against. I think right now where the way it's looking is that after their first round game, they would go back to Carlisle and play the Bison. Didn't go their way last time, but they did have some good moments, and it was really close in the first half. Just couldn't close it out in the second, and Carlisle ended up pulling away big time. And so really going to be interesting to see how Junction City stacks up in the playoffs for sure. Of course, Dominique Grimes is a guy that you have to be watching out for. Brady Penister, Ja'Cory Larry. I mean, these are guys that we've been talking about all season. They should finish out the year pretty strong. Number 7, Mount Ida. The X factor with Mount Ida and the secret weapon they might have is Coach Michael White's nephew has started taking some snaps at quarterback in that split back veer offense. Now it's nothing too serious. Just looking at the stats between Mountainburg and Mount Ida this past weekend, you can see that Coach White put in his nephew there, who's a very talented player and knows how to run that veer option system really well. So if Coach White decides that that's who's going to step up and lead their offense from now on, I don't know if that's going to be the case. Then you could have a very interesting season for Mount Ida. I know he's been super excited about his nephew moving up and possibly running that offense. So we'll see how that goes for Mount Ida. That's what's really intriguing to me. Ben Woodfield might be the leading rusher in the class when it's all said and done. I'd have to go back and look at his stats, but he just continues to have big game after big game. I believe he had close to 300 yards rushing against Mountainburg this week. And so teams are going to have a hard time stopping him. One of the things I want to mention about the bracket is I think The top three seeds from the 2A1 will probably beat the top or the bottom three seeds from the 2A4. I think that's just how it worked out this year. Looking at these teams, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. Some of these games won't matter in the grand scheme of the playoffs, um, but I'm still really interested to see what happens this week with Mount Ida and Conway Christian and Bigelow and some of those other teams and just where they get put. I think right now Mount Ida is set as the 3 seed from that conference, and Bigelow and Conway Christian are gonna match up for that number 1 spot this week. Mark Tree at number 8. They drop a tremendous amount really after losses to Des Arc and Cross County. Um, they've just and then early in the season lost to Newport. They're a team that I think is probably better than their record reflects, but you can't put them above any of these other teams with some of the losses that they've sustained. So Cross County put up 40 on them. Um, it's such a tough place to be for Mark Tree right now. Wouldn't be surprised if they're a team that really had their best run with the class that they have right now. Um, if they had their best run last season when they made it to the semifinals against Bigelow, and um, it's really going to be interesting to see if TJ Hodges just decides to explode, if Kenyon Carter just decides to explode for Mark Tree. They could be a serious contender, but I don't see them in that spot with their line of scrimmage and their defense struggling the way it is right now. Number 9, Cross County. Cross County is a team, of course, big win over Mark Tree last week. Um, and this isn't a situation where you just say, hey, you know what, Cross County beat Mark Tree head to head. We're gonna have to put Cross County ahead of Mark Tree. It's really the way the rankings work is your complete body of work is put up against everybody else's, and we just feel like Mark Tree, with having a 4-star back and having Kenyon Carter in that explosive offense, is so troubling for a lot of teams. But Cross County, they have a 4-star of their own, Danny Beal, on the line of scrimmage. They proved that on the line of scrimmage they could be dominant over Mark Tree. Got the victory 40-28. Um, it's just it's going to be a tough going for Mark Tree to get to that semifinal spot again, but I believe they have a great chance to do it. Cross County, I want to talk about them a little bit more. Coach Van Pascal's having a great first season, struggled a little bit, had a loss to Palestine Wheatley in non-conference that maybe threw some people off, but Palestine Wheatley looks a little bit better this year. Um, they, I believe, will likely be the 2 or the 3 seed out of that 2A2 conference. Um, and I think they've pretty much secured a playoff spot at this point, with unless there's just some chaos that happens. Des Arc and McCrory, if McCrory wins there and Cross County loses, that could make things interesting with McCrory beating Cross County earlier in the year. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Cross County pretty much has a playoff spot locked up at this point. But as we've seen, anything can happen in that 2A2 conference. East Poinsett County at number 10. This is a team that really proves how deep 2A has become. And that wasn't our thought earlier in the season, but 2A has looked like it's pretty deep after some of those top upper echelon teams. East Poinsett County looks like a team that could make a run. They look like they're the favorite to lock up that 2A2 conference. And if they get a win over Mark Tree, then they would win that conference. And they have a conference loss. I believe it's to Cross County. I might be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments, and comment as well if there's anything you want me to talk about in the next episode where we'll be getting into the playoffs. Um, but it's really going to be an interesting situation. I'm really interested to see how East Poinsett County does. Of course, replacing Dennis Gaines we knew was going to be hard, but it looks like they haven't had too many problems doing that this season. So we're going to start off with our games this week. The games are primarily on Thursday this week. 10 games on Thursday, 6 on Friday. I'm going to start with Hazen and Carlisle on Thursday because that's our game of the week in the class. This one is interesting. Hazen started off the season really slow. I believe they started 0-3 in non-conference, and if you're a Conway Christian fan, I think Hazen's. I'll circle back to that in a second. I want to start with Hazen has looked really, really much better since that loss to Conway Christian when they've gotten into conference play. They've been able to put up a lot of points. If you're a Conway Christian fan, watching how they play against Carlisle is going to be interesting because you have that matchup as well to judge against. Now it is a little bit different. Those two teams earlier in the season are going to be different than they are right here at week 10. But I do think it's still going to be a good measuring point for both of those teams. I'm going to pick Carlisle to get the victory at home this week. I think that they win that game pretty easily. But Hazen, JJ Pinkney's a great runner, really quick, fast, elusive, and all that stuff. Can throw the ball really well when they put him in a good spot to do it. Whenever he has that opening, he's pretty good at cashing it in. So I'm going to pick Carlisle to beat Hazen this week, but don't be surprised if Hazen ends up keeping it close, especially with this being a rivalry game. Cross County versus Earl. Um, I'm going to pick Cross County to win this game. Earl is a team that in the 2A4 would definitely be a playoff team. They might be a 3 or 4 seed, maybe a 2 seed with Powen's loss to Bearden. They don't look as good as they have been. But Earl's a very good team. They're just in the toughest conference. But I'm going to pick Cross County to get the victory this week and move to 7-3 under Coach Pascal in his first season. Mountainburg versus Johnson County West Side. I'm going to pick Mountainburg to get the victory in this game. Johnson County West Side is just looking for something to happen. Lost to Magazine. Wouldn't be surprised if they were able to pull it out this week. But I do think that Mountainburg gets the victory in this one. Mountain Pine versus Mount Ida. Mount Ida will roll big time in this one. Mountain Pine not looking as sharp as they did earlier in the season at this moment. And I think that Mount Ida gets the victory. Mineral Springs versus Murfreesboro. Last season, this was a big game on ASN on Thursday night. And Mineral Springs looked like they were going to be the better team heading in. Murfreesboro ends up pulling off the upset and wins the conference and stays undefeated. And that ended up being a spiraling point, really, for Mineral Springs, and ended up really throwing a wrench in their season. They ended up losing to Hector in the first round. I'm not very confident in Mineral Springs' offense, and I'll tell you why. Last week, they only put up 8 points against Dirks, and Dirks defensively this season has not been the strongest team. So I'm not super confident in that offense at this point in the season. I think Murfreesboro is going to win in a blowout fashion this week because their defense is so strong. They're more physical than Mineral Springs is. They're in the driver's seat for that conference championship. Um, I just think Mineral Springs is just not where they were last year for sure. And I think that Murfreesboro is just really a strong team this year. So I'm going to pick the Rattlers to win big time in this one. Junction City versus Spring Hill. Junction City will win big time in this one. Spring Hill is having a hard time adjusting from 8-man to 11-man this season. Girton versus Dirks. I think this game could get interesting with the way Girton can run the ball. It's just going to matter. It's going to depend on if Dirks can if Dirks can be consistent on offense. They have been throughout this season, but I don't know how they're going to look against this Girton team that I think has really started to get a little bit more footing on them. I don't think that they're in it for the playoffs right now, but this is a matchup that's really a tale of two really historic programs in Southern Arkansas. I'm really excited to see what Girton and Dirks do this week. I'm going to pick the Outlaws to win at home. Lafayette County versus Foreman. Lafayette County put up a strong performance against Junction City last week, only lost by 7 points against what I think is a really good Junction City team. I'm going to pick Lafayette County to win this week. They'll move to 4-6 to close out the season. East Poinsett County versus Mark Tree. This is a game that is really going to excite a lot of people. It's a rivalry game. It could decide the conference if all the for East Poinsett County at least. I am going to pick. This is tough. I'm going to pick East Poinsett County to win. I think it's going to be razor thin like it was last year. It might go into multiple overtimes like it did last year. I would not be surprised if Mark Tree ends up winning because of how explosive their offense can be. But I think East Poinsett County gets the victory this week. I think they're just a better line of scrimmage team. Game is at Mark Tree. That might help the Indians a little bit, but I think East Poinsett County gets the victory this week and secures the conference for the second straight season, I might add. Clarendon versus Poen. Clarendon hasn't won a game yet this season. Lost to Baptist Prep 12-6 last week. That might have been their best chance to get a victory. I'm going to pick Poen to get the victory this week at home. They'll move to 7-3 on the season, and they are securely in the playoffs at this point. Move to the games on Friday here. Conway Christian versus Bigelow that will decide the 2A1 conference for the third straight season. I'm going to pick Conway Christian to win in this one. I do think it's going to be tighter than some of the games that Conway Christian has had the past few weeks. I do think Conway Christian probably wins by about 2 scores, maybe 3, if they have a good night. Bigelow will keep it close throughout the entirety of the game. I think Conway Christian, though, will pull away late and win by 2 or 3 scores. Hampton versus Baptist Prep. I am going to pick Hampton. This is another close game. I think that Baptist Prep can win again, and that would put them at 500 on the season. I do think they can win. I just don't know if they're at that point yet. I think they're hitting a turning point in their season, and they have a good chance to go 500 here. But I do think Hampton ends up getting the victory. Des Arc versus McCrory. I'm going to pick Des Arc to win. The game is at McCrory. That could help them. Because playing at Des Arc is so tough, it's really just avoiding that is going to help McCrory a lot. But I do think that Des Arc gets the victory this week. Lee versus Izard County. Excuse me, Mariana Lee versus Izard County. I'm going to pick Mariana to get the victory. Mariana to get the victory in this game. They've had some close games. I think that Izard County has really struggled with moving the needle this season and getting those victories they needed to get, and they've struggled moving to 11-man football. So I'm going to pick Mariana to get the victory this week and get a victory to end their season. Hector versus Magazine. I'm going to pick Hector to get the victory in this game. Hector's a really good team if you look at it. They are going to have a tough time though. They're set up at the moment to play Carlisle in the first round. That's going to really, really hurt them. I think that they're a better team than maybe their record shows. They're not as good as they were last year. Jackson Taylor leaving and PJ Henderson leaving really hurt them. I do think they get the victory over Magazine this week in a mercy rule type victory. But I do think that they're going to have a shorter season than maybe they should because they're playing Carlisle in the first round. Bearden versus England. This game will decide who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. If Bearden loses, England's in. If England loses, Bearden's in. And Bearden gets a good season in the playoffs, really, because they beat Poen last week. And then I think Hazen would probably be bounced to the 4 seed. Hazen's rooting for England this week. I can tell you that much. Even if they lose to Carlisle, Hazen's rooting for England this week. If England wins, they're in. They lose, they're out. It's a make-or-break game for the Lions. Going to be interesting to watch this game on Friday because this is going to tell us a lot about the bracket and who's going to be playing who in the playoffs. I'm going to pick England to get the victory this week. I think that the game's at England, and I think they're going to feel the pressure of needing to get into the playoffs. They win, they're going to have to play Conway Christian or Bigelow in the first round, and that's tough. No matter what season it is, really. So, going to pick England to win. That's going to close out our picks for this week. Again, go ahead, subscribe, follow on subscribe here on YouTube, follow us on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And until next time, I'm Carson Ward for the ASN Rankings Show, signing off.